Hey, you lie about anything, people know you're lying. Guess what? They call you a liar. That's the biggest thing, right? People are challenged by that. I see it every day. People are challenged with telling the truth. They think the truth's going to be bad sometimes. I said, you got to tell them the truth. If it's bad information, they got to hear it too. Because if not, they're going to come back and say, why'd you tell me that when it was really this? Right. So, and for the youngsters, same thing. Don't be afraid to ask. Don't sit back in the corner and hide. Raise your hand. Good questions. Any question's a good question. Ask it. If you don't know the answer, ask it. We'll help you understand it. Doesn't mean you're not smart enough to answer the question yourself, right? So I think that's the secret.
Hello and welcome to the Better People podcast. I'm your host, Holly DePalma, and I am joined today by Greg Cathcart, who is the Senior Vice President of NNIT Incorporated. And thank you for joining us today, Greg.
Thank you, Holly. Appreciate it.
Yeah. So happy to have you join us and tell us a little bit about your journey as a leader and primarily of a people leader as a people leader. So tell me a little bit about yourself and what's brought you to this point in your career.
Yeah, today I am the Senior Vice President of a company called NNIT Inc., which is a consulting organization focused in the pharmaceutical industry. NNIT, acquired my previous company called Exellis Consulting, and 3.5 years ago, and then appointed me to run their U.S. operations just last year, late fall, because they had two other operating companies here in the U.S. as well. So we are rolling those three companies together. NNIT Inc. is a globally publicly traded consulting organization. They have about 2,000 people, and it's owned by the Novo Holdings Group, which is part of the Novo Nordisk companies. So based out of Denmark.
So tell me about, so you started your own firm, Exellis Consulting.
Yep.
Tell me about that. Tell me what made you start it.
Yeah. And I'll even back up before that a little. Fresh out of school, I worked for a company called Johnson & Johnson. Pretty good household name. And the division I worked for was called McNeil Consumer Products, which is the makers of Tylenol, basically. So I did that for about 10 years of my early career. Went back to grad school underneath the J&J umbrella, so I had to stay on for a certain amount of time, very much like the military. And at the end of that tenure, I decided to be more entrepreneurial. So I left and I was a co-founder of a company called QAD. QAD today is public. It was private, we were public, but they went private. Private equity group bought it back recently. Spent almost 12 years there. And then I worked for a large global software company called SAP. Everybody knows their household name as well. All my career, though, was always in the pharmaceutical space. So once I left there and started Exellis, the intent was to be a consulting organization focusing on supply chain in the pharmaceutical industry. So 14 years later, we sold that to NNIT. And that group, grew from four of us. We used to say four guys in a garage to almost 90 people globally. And with offices in Europe and the US, and really helping companies like Johnson & Johnson, Novartis, Merck, Pfizer's of the world that you know, but even people like Walmart, because when it comes to a pharmaceutical drug, they're not just being made, they're being shipped through a supply chain, ultimately to some form of dispenser. Could be in a hospital, it could be a Walgreens and or a Walmart, and ultimately given to a patient. So all the tracking and tracing of pharmaceutical products is very important for the industry and for the patients.
Interesting. So you said a couple of things that certainly in recent years have been on the front of people's minds. You said things like pharmaceutical industry and supply chain, which are two industries that have been under a lot of, or two areas where there's been a lot of pressure and scrutiny lately. So I can imagine not only being bought, but also having some challenges put on by the market have made for an exciting few years.
Yeah, and a lot of it is the traceability of product for counterfeiting issues, fraud and theft issues, but also COVID, right? Vaccines were being produced, but couldn't get to the right people at the right place at the right time. or maybe they got there, but then they were warm because somebody that was transporting them didn't have a truck that kept the product cold. It was supposed to be cold. So there's so many factors that go into it. The biggest issue, though, around all the legislation is really around patient safety. So, and that's counterfeit drugs and or divergent drugs, something like a cold issue, right? So if something is supposed to keep cold and it shows up in an oncology clinic for your cancer treatment and it's been warm for 2 days, it can't be used.
Right.
And if that's the same day that you're supposed to have your infusion, right, or whatever. So it's so important to the health of patients.
So highly regulated industry.
Very much so.
Yeah. So talk to me. You said you started 4 guys in a garage and grew to 90 people. Talk to me about that process and the intentionality of really growing beyond what we call, family and friends, right? The
Yep.
4 people who you're working with are essentially a very tight-knit group.
Yeah, and 4 former colleagues in our career, so we knew each other as well, but multiple companies. So that made it easier to start it, as you can imagine. But it also causes trials and tribulations of, the good days and the bad days. The good days are always easy to handle. The bad days are tough to make decisions, but we gutted it out today. 2 of us are still here. One unfortunately passed away, and one chose to leave God 10 years ago or so, 8 years ago, for different reasons. But then we slowly grew our customer base, which kept the 4 of us busy doing consulting work. And we were all former executives from big pharma companies. So we understood the challenges they all faced. We understood a lot of these new regulations you're talking about that were coming on. So we started that time frame was 2008, 2009, which was not a good time to start a company. Gutted it through for the first couple of years. But by 2011-ish, 12-ish, we were starting to be in a pretty good 20, 25% growth per year, all the way through when we sold in 2020. So as you can imagine, the growth of people through that continuum, as well as growth of people in Europe. So it's not just we did it in the U.S. with the U.S. cultural, but in Europe, it's not even Europe. It's the French guys, it's the Belgians, it's the Germans, Spaniards, Italians, and English. So those are the 6 or 7 countries we have a presence. So bringing them all together too, right? Because culturally, we as Americans think, oh, they're Europeans, they're all the same. No, not even close. So, and we hired good people. I mean, to your question, we hired smart people. We hired a lot of younger, fresh out of school, really intelligent kids coming from great universities, and taught them, a lot of what they learned. And really built the organization. Today, I would say of our 90-ish that we have still employed, I bet you 70 of them are more than 5 to 7 years experience with us.
So let's talk about that. So how did you recruit the smart and fresh out of school to come to a newly founded consulting firm rather than go your route and go to a large, very well-known pharma company?
Yeah, a little bit of it, I think early on, there was no job markets. So we met and did recruitment at the universities. We kind of knew what we wanted. Supply chain education's very big at Drexel, very big at Penn State, very big at Stevens Institute over here in New Jersey. So we focused on those schools. We went to education days, right? We talked to the youngsters and told them our backgrounds and told them where we were today. And we said, you want to go that route, or to your point, you want to go work for big pharma, right? Or big consulting, right? Do you want to go small consulting where you're going to be closer to a customer? Or do you want to go work for Deloitte or an Accenture? I'm not saying they're bad paths at all, but you really have to, work your way up the chain to ever get in face with a customer, right? Because it's such a large firm. Our kids, I call them kids because I'm, much older than most of them, and it's a nice term. Some of them today, 32, 33, they've been with us 10 years now. They're having babies, and now they're running whole groups of people within the organization, right? So they took the baton and they ran with it. So we're pretty excited for them because they've done great things along the way, and they continue to strive to do that.
Yeah. So talk to me a little bit more about the recruiting. And, I love going to schools and talking about what
Yeah.
you do and the opportunity that you have. But what kinds of recruitment practices did you put in place to make sure that you were hiring smart and people who fit your organization or your organizational culture?
Most of it was, like I said, those schools with the study programs,
Mm-hmm.
which was supply chain, right? And if you go back 20 years ago, 25 years ago, the word supply chain, people didn't even know what that meant,
Mm,
right? But
right.
we certainly learned with COVID when you couldn't get out, joke when I say this, you couldn't get your toilet paper, right? And things like that. Everyone all of a sudden realized what supply chain meant. And when all the ships were sitting in the ocean off of Los Angeles and the lakes in California, you couldn't get parts for your new furnishings in your house. So all of a sudden supply chain became popular, but it was always so critical in the success of the business that these universities years ago put in full business programs called supply chain. It's kind of an engineering program, business program combined. So we targeted those colleges. And of course, once we'd hire one gentleman or woman in the first year, we'd ask them if they have any friends.
Huh?
Right. And again, you don't refer somebody. We used to tell them, don't refer them because they're your friend. Refer them because you think they could be a player on the team for the long run, because that means a lot about you too as a person referring. So it became a friends of a friends of a friends, right? Or a university friend of a friend of a friend as we grow and grow and grow. So we bought some other people out of industry. Don't get me wrong. Probably today, half the company came through the younger recruitment work, and half probably came in from industry that we hired from either customers or just knew them through industry.
So we hear a lot about young people not staying long at positions
Yep.
and wanting growth and wanting development. You mentioned that, your group is around 90 employees. So, and that you've had folks who've really stayed 10 years with you. What do you attribute that to?
We've also had recently, it's kind of fun. And it's interesting enough fun, but a couple that left maybe 3 years ago, post COVID, because again, jobs were starting to open up again and now come back. So that's always, to me, it means a lot. It means they had something here that they enjoyed. And when they left, I tell them all, hey, I'm not going to hold you back. I'm not going to tell you no. Go, it's your life. Go try. If there's an opening here for you when you're interested, we'll have you back. And if there's not, we just can't hire. And we have one young lady now that wants to come back. I love her. We love her. She's great. We just don't have an opening. So we said, hey, sit tight, stay where you're at. And by the end of the year, we'll need somebody in that role. So we'll bring her back. But I think it's just the ability for them to grow, right, and learn. I mean, they're doing consulting work with executives and pharmaceutical companies on a daily basis, right? Real decisions, not just taking notes in a meeting with 40 people in it because it's a Johnson & Johnson or a really big company, right? So a lot of our customers are very small, launching their first pharmaceutical product ever companies, and very specialty oncology types of cell and gene therapy types of products, right? That if you look at some of the companies in the area, even Spark Therapeutics in Philadelphia, 2 shots, one in each eye, and a child who is blind can see.
Right.
Right. So that's kind of also rewarding. That you work with the CEOs of these companies, right? Because these companies only have 30, 40, 50 employees themselves. So I think that's part of it. It gives them a chance to really grow their personal knowledge and their own resume. But I say the same thing to them. I say, you can always go work for a big consulting firm after being here 8 to 10 years, and you might even go into the partner program or close to it. But, so far they like what they're doing. They stay. I think we give them a lot of flexibility. And I think you have to do that with the younger generation because they're coming out of school with a work at home mentality, whatever, right? A Zoom mentality you and I are doing right now. So you have to allow for that, which is fine. Customers allow for it. So why would I have them come in an office just to do a Zoom call? Right? Do that from home.
So tell me about flexibility. Let's dive into that a little bit more. We hear a lot that workers today want flexibility.
Yeah.
How do you make sure that you are providing the right kinds of flexibility? How are you making sure that your business needs are being met while still maintaining that flexibility and maintaining your culture in this sort of different kind of workplace?
The culture is probably the hardest because you're not together. I'll start there, but we'll come back to that. As an organization, even pre-COVID, we lived all over the country. So you weren't going to go to the office anyhow. We have an office here in New Hope, Pennsylvania. On a daily basis, we have about 12 people here. Most of those 12 are either in our sales or finance or marketing group, and they all live within 25 miles. So jokingly, I tell them they want to get out of the house and come sit in an office because it's easier than sitting home sometimes. But if you're a consultant working with a customer on their issues or projects or whatever, you might be assigned to a project with a client for 2 years.
Right.
But the interaction used to be fly to their facility, spend a week there, maybe 2 weeks, and then sometimes, work out of your house for 2 weeks. There's no fly to the facilities anymore. At best, maybe once a year or twice a year. So, because everyone's moved to this new medium and they're all good with it. We have meetings with our customers that they're in their offices. They don't come to the same conference room to get on the Zoom call. They stay in their individual offices. So that's the culture part. I think that'll hurt the culture in the long run, because culture to me is spending time together, getting to know each other. Don't know that about it, who you are, your families, standing at the water cooler. I point out here because we have a water cooler, right? That's the old days of what you learn things. So I feel for the young kids because they don't get part of that. Right. But they want the flexibility because they want to know. And I tell them, hey, if your client says at 3:00 this afternoon, we're done because we've achieved our goals today. I don't care what you do at 3:00 on. Go take your wife and go spend an early dinner somewhere. Right. You did your job for the day. That was the most important thing. And by the way, my secretary just said to me, got to go to the dentist tomorrow. I said, go to the dentist. No big deal. It's just part of it. You have to allow for it. Because if you don't, that's going to turn them off, I think, purposely, And again, those old days are coming in, and the boss looked at it and almost wasn't a time card, but I know when I was at Johnson & Johnson as a young kid, somebody knew I was there every day by 8:00.
Oh, yeah.
There was a timekeeper somewhere, even though I wasn't punching the clock, and they know what time I left, right? So it's kind of stupid as we look at it today, and I hate to use that strong of a word, but they also didn't have the technologies we have, so that's part of it. I mean, that's changed a lot of it.
I love telling young people when I teach a class or I do something, and I tell them that I started working when we didn't have computers on our desks.
Yep.
And they look at you like, how did you do anything? And we certainly have seen a significant change in the workplace. So with respect to building culture by being together, what do you do to supplement that? What do you do to make sure that you're bringing people into your culture in an effective way, even in a virtual world?
No, it's good question. On an annualized basis, we do an annual kickoff meeting, which this year we did down in Atlantic City at one of the casinos, because for 2 reasons. We want everyone together. We want to have some fun. We'll do some work, don't get me wrong, but also have some fun. So part of it was the celebration of how well we finished last year. Part of it was the education of what the plans were for this year. But the third part of it was just being together. And since I had just taken over the 2 other companies within NNIT, and when I went to open my speech at it, and now I have 200 people in front of me, I noticed they were all separate in the room. And I said, okay, end of that one. Everyone stand up. I want you 2 who's 7 on this row, move over there. I made them all move. They didn't know what the heck I was doing. They were like, I'm not moving. I said, no, you move. I point them out. I said, I'm going to force you to sit with your new peers. We're still going to go through the same PowerPoint slides. We're still going to have the same restaurant tonight. We're still going to have the same concert after the restaurant and all the fun together. But I said, but during the day, you're used to sitting with your colleagues from before. That's all right. You don't need to sit with them. You might learn something from somebody sitting next to you. Nothing more than, hey, how are you? What's your name? So that's kind of, I hate to say the word force, but it's easy to hide behind this computer monitor.
Oh, yeah.
So I wanted them to get in there and engage and shake hands and say hello. And by the way, first night at the cocktail reception, how's it going? Somebody asked me, I said, just look around the room. Right. They weren't all just with their former teams. They were now talking to the same people they sat next to in the room today, introducing them to their former teammates. Right. Right. So that happened for 3 days. And it's easy to go back in your hole and do it the way you did it before. So We do regional meetings this way via Zoom. And then we have other departmental type meetings, usually twice a year, and I'll attend them wherever they're at, just so everyone get to see me in person as well. It's tough. It's a business that people live all over the country.
Right.
So you're not going to be together every week, and that's okay. We work around it.
So let's move to, you brought up bringing 3 companies together, and you leading this group. So 2 things, right? You were four guys in a garage.
Yeah.
Built the company. Now you're blending 3 companies into one and working for a large publicly traded conglomerate.
Yep.
So that's like a culture calamity, if you will, right? So very, very different. I'm assuming cultures from each organization and then putting it together. Talk to me about this process. How did you get your folks to stay through a merger, through an acquisition, and how are you continuing to blend these cultures and maintain your culture, I'm assuming, while you're still part of this conglomerate? That's a lot of questions.
No, and it's very understandable question. Don't get me wrong. I would say the starting point, like I said, was in January when we bought them all together for the meeting. In the 2 other companies, there's people that had never met each other because they didn't spend a lot of time on cultural aspects of it, even video, right, or whatever, Teams meetings. So when I saw that, I was like, wow, this is a good move. Right, we got them all together. Minimally, they're meeting the folks from their old company and then start to meet some of ours. That's part of it. We absolutely focused on the sales organization integration first, because at the end of the day, if we couldn't sell more and more and more, it would impact everyone else. Everyone else was a little worried because, I hear typically when companies integrate, people get laid off. So we showed them all the statistics that says who we are as a now bigger company and why they won't get laid off, and nobody's been laid off. And a few have left, probably 3, maybe 4, which isn't too bad for half a year. It's still pretty low. I think our attrition rate is very low, especially within our own company. And that was just by showing them how they were going to do their jobs, how they're going to be compensated. Right. I'm very open for bonuses. You're going to know, Holly, on January 10th, how you make your bonus. And it's not gray at all. It's you have to do X. You have 2 indicators. One of them's company. The company makes its goal of profitability. Pretty simple. We report that every month. So as an employee, you know that one. And you as a consultant, if you bill X amount of hours to a client every year, you make your goal. Pretty simple. They didn't have that infrastructure prior. So I think that was easy to get the other 2 companies on board on that. And that also is personal, right? Everybody takes that personally. So I get questions all the time now. How we doing the company money? How's our profitability, right? So we share that every month. But it's good to see that they care because it personally impacts them. The other piece is, again, just trying our best to get them to open and ask questions and things like that, right? Don't be afraid. I have people come here all day. I say, hey, if you guys are within an hour of the office, anytime, just come. I'll make time to talk to you. Mm-hmm. It takes time to do that, but it works. So you have to be willing to do that. And that's been the biggest area. So getting the sales team focused gets the rest of the team focused, because you have to deliver what the sales people are selling in a combined team.
So I heard a couple of different themes in that discussion around, I'll say, combining organizational cultures. It was clarity of expectation.
Yep.
And it was transparency of where we stand and how you can contribute to that.
Yep.
As well as open door communication and real openness and willingness and desire to connect with others.
Yep.
Is there anything else that you believe is absolutely imperative for a CEO to do, or someone in charge to do, when really looking at an integration of cultures.
I think the transparency is the biggest.
Mhm.
Yes, you could do lots of little things, but if you're not willing to open up and let folks know what you're either thinking or trying to accomplish, you won't get them to get on board. And the last thing you do, they might still do their job, but if they're not focused at the same goals, to your point, right? How can we as an organization make our goals, even though some individuals might make their goals? That doesn't help the overall organization either. So it's being transparent with them that they are 90 plus 90 is a lot better than just 90, right? We're all pulling for the same output. And hey, we have age differences from 70 to the probably youngest. We have a couple college graduates from 2 years ago, so they're 24, 25. Living in San Francisco, San Diego, Arizona, Texas, Chicago, Florida, all the way up from here to Boston. So you got all different cultures here too, right? Just within this great country, the U.S. So, and they don't get to see each other much. So it's hard. I'm not saying it's easy, but you got to make it work. If you don't make it work, they'll sit back and not want to be engaged, and everything will fall apart. I mean, that's just. I'm sure there's companies you've dealt with in the past. They acquire something, they leave it over there, they don't even talk to it, and before you know it, everyone left the company. You don't even know what happened.
Oh, sure. I mean, I've worked with organizations that have merged and then said, we don't like each other and split. And it's been an extremely difficult, taxing process on the people as well as the productivity of and success of both organizations.
And we are a people person company, excuse me. We don't make software. We don't make a piece of equipment to sell you. We sell you intelligence. So people are the number one priority in our company. So if we don't take that priority serious, we can't re-engineer, right? Say you have a new car and Tesla, right? You want to have a new car, you get new engineers. We don't have that luxury. We lose customers because the people working with that customer failed the customer, which means we failed the people.
I'm curious about, sorry, I'm curious about one of the challenges organizations that we work with have when they go from small friends and family, if you will, to much larger and much wider span of control is the development of managerial practices and good process and practice, which is like a dirty word almost to, the entrepreneurial folks. But there is a need to have real management people. And how have you trained or developed or identified leaders or brought leaders in from the outside?
No, it's a good question. And you asked earlier about regulated industries.
Oh, yeah.
Pharma is a very regulated industry. So we preach to our customers every day how to make sure they button up all the details.
Right.
Similar to what you just said. So I think a lot of that's intuitive in the way we work as a company. So we've had one leader, I could tell you right now, that we had to let go a couple of years ago because that leader was not leading. That leader was, I don't want to say abusive, but nasty son of a, you know what? And the people that worked for him were doing great work, but still getting, told they weren't and this and that. And I said, I can't afford to lose the 15 people that work for them. I got to get rid of the one that's causing the problems. But that was just a bad hire. So you have to address it, correct it. That's probably the biggest challenge as executives of companies, and you make a bad hire, you got to make a correction on it.
How did you learn that it was a bad hire?
Because I knew the people that were reporting up through him, and they had great relationships with me. And it's not like they came and told me the problems that he was causing. I could see them. I can see the interactions in rooms together, even on on Teams meetings like this. You can see people just not be mean, folding their arms, not listening. Right. Because that person would be speaking, and a good leader has to recognize that. And I don't want to say I'm a good leader; I'm an average leader, but you could see it, and I had to make a quick decision, and I'm not regretting the decision at all. And the people came back and they even put more emphasis into the company because they appreciate that I made the hard decision for me personally, let the guy go, but the best for them and the company.
So that's another thing I just heard about. Sort of another inference I've made about culture in your organization, which is really being involved. And like you said, I see in a meeting, I watch in a meeting, somebody's body language changes and they're not sort of committed. These are my words,
Yep.
of course. But so being that in charge, but still being in the trenches, if you will, to have a first line view of what's going on and making sure that the culture is trending in the way that you want it to be going.
Yep. And I think I've sat in the seats of almost everybody on this team.
Mm-hmm.
Went up in the pharmaceutical industry for, I don't want to say that, I guess it's been, I just celebrated my 39th wedding anniversary, and I was working for 4 years before that. So I guess 43 years. 43 years in pharma, right? Or 42 years in pharma. I mean, you learn a lot too. When I worked for Johnson & Johnson for 10 years or 11 years, I think it officially was, they put you in different roles on purpose.
Yep.
To ground you and your skill sets, right? So that you can take a leadership role and ultimately an executive leadership role. That wasn't for me, which was fine, but I have still to this day have great friends from there, great respect for what they do, because that's the way they've done it. That's good. So that's, I think, part of which, and my management team today all have had years, 15, 20 years of experience in industry and in their domain knowledge, and all their team knows that and respects that. And then they, and vice versa, respect it downwardly. And if the youngsters don't know it, they're not afraid to teach them, especially if they're willing to listen. I think that's the biggest challenge sometimes. One of my more senior leaders, and I say because he's older than me as a joke, he'll teach you anything and take all the time of day to help you. But if you don't take his help, he won't return your phone call. So it does go both ways. If these youngsters want to learn and become him someday, making the amount of money he makes, right? They got to want to learn too and be willing to put their self out there, to your point, a little bit. But that, and we've encouraged them to do that. Right.
So my last question, you just called yourself an average leader.
Yep.
What makes a great leader? And what do you want to do differently to make yourself a better leader?
So I call myself an average leader because I think if you ever get too far over your skis in anything in life, you fall and splatter on your face. I'm proud to say that I have a PACT award in my office here as CEO of the Year, which was voted on by my team. They're the ones that voted for us and for me. So I just think if somebody's in my era, 15, 20 years younger, the most important thing for success is listen to people, embrace people. You said the words earlier, be transparent with people. Hey, you lie about anything, people know you're lying. Guess what? They call you a liar. That's the biggest thing, right? People are challenged by that. I see it every day. People are challenged with telling the truth. They think the truth's going to be bad sometimes. I said, you got to tell them the truth. If it's bad information, they got to hear it too. Because if not, they're going to come back and say, why'd you tell me that when it was really this? Right. So, and for the youngsters, same thing. Don't be afraid to ask. Don't sit back in the corner and hide. Raise your hand. Good questions. Any question's a good question. Ask it. If you don't know the answer, ask it. We'll help you understand it. Doesn't mean you're not smart enough to answer the question yourself, right? So I think that's the secret, just transparency.
And humility.
Yeah, you got to have a lot of that. Hey, I'm too old for anything but anymore. Exactly.
I have really enjoyed this conversation.
You too.
Greg, thank you so much for your time and lots of continued success to the organization. And sounds like, a really exciting time for what you're doing and doing important work. So
yeah, I appreciate that. And for the entire organization, thank you. Because again, my job now is to get them ready for when I officially step down the next year or so to continue to grow and to continue upon this. So that's important too.
Right.
But thanks, Holly.
Lovely talking to you. Have a lovely day.
Take care.
Bye-bye.